take action. Take action. If you want something different, take action. That's the long and short. Don't sit there whining about how miserable this is or that is. Do something about it.
It's time for the SHAIR Recovery Podcast, where we bring you amazing life-changing success stories from addicts and alcoholics all over the world who share their inspiring journey in recovery. And now, here's your host,
On today's episode of the SHAIR Podcast, Dr. George Baxter-Holder, now 15 years clean, and the author of Drugs, Food, Sex, and God, takes us through 9 years of horrific intravenous methamphetamine abuse. George started using drugs at the age of 16 as a coping mechanism for dealing with his feelings of insecurity when he discovered he was gay. It quickly progressed into a full-blown addiction to crystal meth, and he eventually starts living in the streets and dealing drugs to support his very expensive drug habit. While in his addiction, George gets arrested and spends 3 years in prison for drug dealing, and it turns out to be the best thing that could have ever happened to him. It was in jail that George has his first spiritual awakening and his journey into recovery begins. Today, Dr. George holds a PhD as a nursing practitioner, and his focus is on abundant wellness and beauty for his patients. More importantly, he is an active member in his recovery community, carrying his message of hope to the still suffering addicts. Join us now. And after this interview, if you enjoyed listening to the SHAIR Podcast, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes or Stitcher Radio. This will ensure we get ranked well on these networks, and that means more people will easily find the SHAIR Podcast. This is the best way to show your support and help us grow. And finally, if you would like to make a donation to the SHAIR Podcast, you can do so using PayPal. The entire amount of your donation will go towards maintaining and growing the show. On the top right corner of the website, you'll see a donate button. Just click on it, and this will take you to the page where you can make your donation. Thanks again for helping the SHAIR Podcast become a huge success. Now back to the show. Hi, George. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, hey, thanks for having me, Omar.
It's great to have you on the show today. How you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. I've had a good day so far. Started out with me sharing my story, and now it's finishing up with me sharing my story. So it's a good day.
All right. Well, let's get started on story number 2.
Excellent.
All right. So, folks, today on the SHAIR Podcast, we have Dr. George Baxter-Holder joining us, the author of Drugs, Food, Sex, and God. An addicted drug dealer goes from convict to doctor through the power of intention. So let's dive right in. Dr. George, tell us about how your life is today. Take us into your normal daily routine, including recovery, and also tell us about this amazing book.
Wow. It's funny, as you read the title of that book, it just still moves me so much to hear it, because the title came to me in a meditation I was doing. It just sort of downloaded and hit me, and it hit me hard, and it still today hits me like that. But so my life today is really full. It's really full, and it almost gets into where I start complaining about it. I don't want to complain about my full life, but I have a amazing time with my work, and I'm a nurse practitioner. I work as a doctor of nursing practice in facial aesthetics. So my day is spent doing Botox and fillers and laser and skin tightening on the women and men in Seattle and Bellevue. And I have a great time with that. So my daily routine is, it's a little bit spent with that. And then I have a whole slew of sponsees, and I go to my recovery meetings, and I keep pretty busy all in all.
That's pretty inspirational, thinking about being a doctor and having to do surgeries, and then on top of that, having sponsees and going to meetings. It's inspirational because so many of us get so busy, and that whole aspect of service kind of sometimes goes to the wayside.
Yeah, it's funny. Every now and then a sponsee or a friend will come to me and say, I am so busy. I don't know that I can do that, that coffee maker position, or that, do that thing. And I just laugh, and I say, I will hold up your busy life to my busy life any day of the week. Now, get in there, and get off your phone, and stop the Twitter and the Facebook and go make the coffee, because the funny thing is what I've realized in my life, what I realized writing this book, actually, Omar, is I waste so much time. And I would spend, when I was writing Drugs, Food, Sex, and God, I would spend about an hour every morning just writing. You know, I'd go into meditation, then I'd start writing, and I'd write for about an hour. And I did that for about a year and a half, and bam, I have a book.
That's commitment. That's what it takes, period.
Yeah. The intention, and that's where it comes, the subtitle of that book, Through the Power of Intention. It's like you have to use the energy force in the universe to for your best unfolding.
Yes, and I know I've heard before, because I listen to a lot of podcasts and read a lot of, outside of recovery, I read a lot of success books and entrepreneurial books. And, one of the things that they talk about is that exactly what you're talking about, which is, I don't have the time. Well, let's take a look at how much time you spend watching TV, on Facebook, on all the social medias. Let's see if in your day where you're doing all that stuff, you could take, like you did, 1 hour a day and write, whether it's a paragraph or a page or whatever you got done in that day, and then multiply that over a year or 2 years' time. And like you have a book.
Yeah. And now that I have a book, I have speaking engagements, and I'm going to Washington, D.C. for Unite for the Face of Addiction. I'll be selling my book there in Washington, D.C. October 4th. And, it's not just a book anymore. Now it's become an enterprise. It's another part-time job.
Absolutely. I got you. All right, so let's start here with how much clean time you have and when your anniversary date is.
July 8th, I celebrated 15 years clean.
Amazing. I love it.
I got out of prison February 8th, 15 years ago. And I remember passing that date thinking, wow, it's been 15 years since I've been out of prison. And it kind of rolled on from there. And, all the 5-year birthdays seem to stir something up for me somehow.
I think they stir something up for most of us. My 5-year and my 10-year were pretty amazing and pretty exciting, and a lot of life-changing things happen in those times. So I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how old were you the first time you drank or used drugs? And more importantly, how did they make you feel?
Oh, the very first time I drank, I must have been very, very young. And I'm not exactly sure of how old, but probably 7 or 8. And it was... my sisters were throwing a New Year's Eve party, and I remember going around and finishing the rest of everybody's drinks, sitting around, and it was, they thought it was funny. I was having a good time, and I just remember feeling like I finally fit in to this group of people. My sisters are 7 or 8 and 9 years older than I am, and I always wanted to fit in and never felt like I did from a very early age. And I think that's kind of a common story amongst addicts. It's just that feeling of unworthiness and disconnection.
Absolutely, which is predominantly what most of us feel. There's a common thread, or I guess a common element, where we need that feeling of belonging. And the alcohol certainly does help as we're progressing in our adolescence.
But I didn't really get into where I was actively seeking drugs until I was probably about 15 or 16 years old, and I used them as a method to keep from feeling feelings that were bubbling up inside. Feelings of unworthiness from simply I grew up as a young gay man, not knowing what the word was, and just knowing that my feelings about life were different than everybody else's feelings about life, and I couldn't express myself because of fear.
Right, absolutely. I got you. In today's society, being gay is very socially acceptable. And there's never any, today the stigma is gone, at least in the circles that I run in. But, in our generations growing up, when I was in my teens, that was definitely not something that, coming out of the closet was not something that you saw very often.
Right.
So, right. George, I think you're all warmed up, buddy, and I'm really excited to hear your story. So I'm going to turn this show over to you. It's time for you to share your story, the battle against drugs and alcohol, the wreckage it caused in your life, when you hit rock bottom, and finally your journey into recovery up until today. So, George, take it away.
Beautiful. So I talked a little bit about the fact that I felt from a very early age like I didn't belong and I didn't fit in. And, that feeling, I don't like sitting in that feeling too long when I'm sharing my story, because I think people really identify with the feeling of separateness and separation. But that took me into the end of high school, into college, where I really started exploring and experimenting with drugs and alcohol. And I was in a fraternity in college, and I would just take everything to the extreme. Like, I remember, if my friends were drinking a 6-pack, I was drinking a 12-pack. And, if my friends were smoking 1 joint, I was smoking 2 and 3, and it's just, I always had to have more, and I always had to have more than you did. And that's a really dangerous place for an addict.
Absolutely.
To be pushing those kind of limits and pushing those kind of boundaries. But when I was high, I would feel otherworldly, and that went on. That went on for a while. Eventually I moved down to Los Angeles. I dropped out of college. I moved down to Los Angeles to be an actor, and did that for a little while. I had an episode of Star Trek that I was on, and that sort of followed.
You were on Star Trek?
Yeah, I was on Star Trek: The Next Generation. I was a 12-year-old genetically perfect child.
I love it, man.
Yeah, it was awesome. But, when I was doing the filming, I would go out to my little trailer on the Paramount lot, and I would get stoned in my trailer. Even then, I didn't realize what was unfolding about my life. I got sober for the first time just a little bit after that, down in Los Angeles in a really big group down there, and stayed sober for a few years. And really felt like my life was starting to unfold and become my own again. I really felt good about the direction I was taking. And then I found methamphetamines. I thought that my problem was alcohol. And I didn't know that my problem was addiction.
Right.
And really that's what it boils down to is when I started smoking pot and using methamphetamines, I didn't drink again for another year because I really felt like my problem was alcohol. And that'll take you down fast. I was using intravenous methamphetamines for about 9 years. And
well, that's
in order to it was again going back to that feeling of needing more and faster. It was the way that I could get more and faster.
Right.
Devastating. It was just devastating for me.
Well, I've seen plenty of guys in the rooms come in when they're doing exactly what you're doing, and they're just these skeletons of a human being that walk into a room, and the look of desperation is so overwhelmingly strong in these individuals. So I'm like getting this image of what this could look like for you.
Well, the thing is, Omar, at the time I was 6'3", and I was 185 pounds, and I was all sucked up. And thought that I was looking hot.
Of course,
I really thought I was something to be desired at that point. So
I can't tell you how many times that's always the case. Like, you're so deluded into thinking, look at how thin and sexy I look, right? And you look like E.T.
Oh, exactly. Oh my God. Yeah. So in order to support my habit, I was selling dope, and it wasn't long before selling dope's going to get you in trouble. And I ended up going to prison, which was, in retrospect, the absolute best thing that ever happened to me. It's not a place I'd ever want to find myself again, but it was the time of my life where I could just stop and hit reset.
Yeah, you had to.
Yeah. Now, I'd like to say that I stopped using drugs for good when I went to prison, but that's not the case. I got out of prison February 8th in the year 2000, and I didn't. My clean date's July 8th, as I said, and
Right.
so there was a period of about 5 miserable months in there where I'm bouncing along the bottom until my probation officer simply said, you've got a choice to make. You can either go back to prison and do the rest of your time, or go on in recovery and move on with your life. And it was at that moment, it was a spiritual awakening where I decided that I needed to follow a different path. And he was giving me the option of following a different path. And I immediately got into my recovery. He said, you can go, I want you to go to 90 meetings in 90 days. And I didn't think that sounded like a good idea at all, because when you're out there getting loaded, you don't realize what a good suggestion that is. And 90 days later to the day, I went and saw him with my court slip with all my sign-in slips, and I had 180 signatures on my sign-in slips.
Wow. That is awesome.
Yeah. So I was going to, at least 2 meetings a day, and really got into my recovery, and my life just took off from there. Then that was what happened. And now what it's like. So from there, Omar, things happen in a way that when you look back on them and you say, God, how did I get here? Everything seems so erratic. I was working at this job, and I was a marketing specialist for this Linux programming company. I didn't even really know what Linux was, but they had me marketing their stuff, and they were going out of business because they had me marketing their stuff, and I didn't know what Linux did. So I got laid off my job. And when that happened, my world turned upside down, because all of a sudden I was wondering what I was going to do with my life. And I made some good money out there, selling dope. So it's always one of those things in the background that teases you, well, come back and do this. And so I really didn't know what I was going to do, but what happened was somebody made a suggestion for me to go to nursing school. And I went to nursing school, and I became a nurse. And it was a calling that had been looking for me my whole entire life. And slowly, but I went through nursing school. Became an ER nurse, and I went on in my career and became a nurse practitioner. And now in 2012, I graduated with my doctorate in nursing from Duke University, and really realized at that point that my life had kind of come full circle, where I've gone from being a drug-addicted felon to a doctor, and it was time to write a book.
Right? Now, the name of the book is Drugs, Food, Sex, and God. So what about the food, and what about the sex?
So, addicts are addicts,
yes.
Period.
More. Give me more.
Give me more, and it doesn't really matter what it is. Drugs, food, sex are all symptoms of the same disease. When I was in prison, I used food to hide and protect myself. And I went from being that sucked up, not so beautiful 185 pounds. I got out of prison at 228 pounds in 8 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And went up to 242 pounds before I started going back down again.
Unbelievable. That's big.
Yeah. So, it's, and it wasn't a pretty big either.
Well, when you're eating, gaining weight, and not exercising, the look is not good.
Yeah. So I remember, we'd get these bags of store in prison, and I would always order like 4 or 5 boxes of Little Debbie's, little Nutty Buddies, these peanut butter bars, and I would just scarf them down.
So the sugar addiction.
Yeah, definitely. And then sex, sex addiction for me was pretty powerful. It actually almost took me back out when I had about 10 years clean, because I was acting in a way that was not at all appropriate for someone that says that they're in recovery. And that's hard. that's a hard life to live when you are, you're going to meetings and you're living a good solid life and you're sponsoring guys and that kind of stuff. And then, you're slipping out the back door and you're leaving meetings earlier and you're going and doing your thing. It was devastating for me to feel like that and feel like that clean. And I talk about it in the book and how powerful that addiction can be. And it's funny because what I was waiting for was a reason to stop. And the second that I met my husband, Travis, the switch turned off, and I no longer look outside. I no longer have to seek and search like that. And it's beautiful, but that's where the sex addiction part comes from.
Now, did you do any did you join like SLAA or did you do anything of that fashion?
No, the program that I go to, I go to a 12-step program and it covers all of it for me. The 12 steps, I don't need to work 12 steps over here and 12 steps over there and 12 steps. The 12 steps that I can work around anything. It really covers addiction and it covers it all for me. I probably could go to an SLAA meeting or two and get some relief. But really it's about symptoms.
Yes, it's true.
It's not about substance. It's about symptom. And today I need to find my connection with my higher power that's going to fill that hole inside that I'm looking to fill with food or sex or methamphetamines.
Well, when I first got clean, my sponsor, he had, one of the reasons why he was in NA, and, I found NA because I was, just killing myself with cocaine. And so, and I remember he says, the reason why I'm in Narcotics Anonymous is because it's an all-encompassing program. It's about addiction. There isn't anything specific about any mood or mind-altering substance, whether it be food, drugs, sex, whatever. Whatever kind of addiction that you have, you can work these 12 steps, and you will be relieved of that obsession to use. You just apply, whatever that X factor is, you can use these 12 steps to get clean and sober. So I could totally relate to that mindset.
And it talks about it. A third paragraph of the basic text talks about the fact that the 12 steps were developed by our forefathers in AA, and that in Narcotics Anonymous, the broadening of the perspective into all addictions and not just a substance. And it talks about it there in the introduction. I'll never forget being at this, outpatient, IOP, intensive outpatient treatment.
Right.
Or program or something. And I wish I knew who it was, but this counselor was sitting there and she was questioning me about why I hadn't been going to 12-step meetings. And I said, well, I just don't know. I don't really want to go back to AA. I'm being all cool, And I'm like, AA, NA, it's all the same thing. She goes, oh, really? It's all the same thing? And I said, yeah, it's all the same, really. And she pulls out a big book and she pulls out a basic text and she pulls them out to the 12 steps. She goes, read step 1. And I read it out of the big book and, realized we're powerless over alcohol and our lives have become unmanageable. And then I get to the basic text and we realize we were powerless over drugs. Oh, it doesn't say drugs. And she tripped me up with that. And right then I realized that, no, my problem was bigger than a drug or an alcohol or this or that. My problem was much, much bigger. And over the past 15 years, Omar, I've realized just exactly how big it is. Because when you get clean and the drugs go, then everything else comes up.
Oh, man. And, as terrifying as that is, that deconstruction of the self, what happens when you work these steps. And it took me, I worked the 12 steps out of the step working guide. And so it took me 4 years to finish them. It took me a long time. I didn't take it lightly. My sponsor would never let me slide. I would show up every week with step work, and he always brought a red pen with him.
Oh.
Yeah. And it was like, denial. You didn't read it right. No, this is bullshit. All right.
Wow.
I had a very hardcore sponsor. And, you know, I tell you, the very first times that happened, you know, you get the ego. You know, the ego first goes, you know, I've done all this work. Like, I felt so good about my step work, and I show up, right? And then you get, like, rejected.
Red pen.
The red pen, dude, seriously. And I would be like, wow. But I tell you, the first few times that I went back and redid the work, that's where the magic happened. I recognized that I really needed to focus on that question. That question was for me. And I really needed to dig deep and look at because the answers all come from us, from ourselves, and they're very introspective. And so I'd go back and I'm like, dude, I got it. He's like, this is why we do this, all right? And you're gonna take your sponsees through this same thing, and I do the same thing. You know, I take them through. You know, when I work steps with a sponsee, it's typically through the step working guide, and I bring the red pen, and a few of them, you know, they never come back. They hate the red pen, but I go, listen, I only know one way to do this, and this is the way that it was taught to me, and it worked for me.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. And you pass on what you've been so freely given. I don't have a red pen with my sponsees, and it's probably a good thing. It's funny. I think two of them they're writing their own book of Georgisms, because I'll give them a line or a look, and they know exactly what's what. You know, I have a lot of fun with my sponsees. I am honored to be a sponsor today.
Absolutely. That's exactly how I feel. And I get more out of the steps now when I work them with a sponsee than I did even the first time I went through it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Isn't that funny how that works? You know, my last time, actually, through my last 4-step that I worked was the deepest I have ever gone in a 4-step. I feel like I processed a resentment, like the resentment with my father. I feel like I processed that. I don't feel like I even need to put that on another 4-step. Like, he's been on every single one of my 4 steps, and I think that was the last time. It's amazing how you get, like, they talk about peeling the onion, which I don't really understand, because once you've peeled the onion all the way, you're left with nothing. I like more of an artichoke, where you peel an artichoke, you get down to the heart of things, and I really feel like I've got down to the heart of that resentment. So,
I like that.
You can steal it.
Yeah, for sure. I like it. I was like, wow, that does sound a lot more, because I never even go as far as to the nothing part of the onion. I just think about peeling an onion layer and imagining this giant, because, you know, I've never peeled an onion layer, an onion all the way down to nothing. So I guess the visual aspect of it was never there, but now you've killed it for me.
Sorry about that.
Fortunately, we have the artichoke now, so I can start using that one moving forward.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I want to talk about the book just for a second before I get too far off it. So what I found when I graduated with my doctorate is that I had gone through a process of life change that if I looked really diligently, I could find a pattern to it. And what I found is 9 steps, different than the 12 steps, but that there was 9 phases, if you will, that I went through with big things. And now that I really look at it, I go through them with small things too. And the 9 steps I talk about in the book, there are 9, the 9 central chapters of the book. And it'll sound really familiar to people in recovery, but step 1 is struggle. Step 2 is surrender. Step 3 is belief. Step 4 is taking stock and inventory, if you will, of your gifts. And then step 5 is allowing in your dreams. 6 is crafting your goals and making plans and then taking action. And the last step in that 9-step process is celebrating, and really being able to celebrate each time you go through a cycle of life change. But when you are in that celebration is when you notice the next struggle. like graduating from school was a great celebration, but then what am I going to do with it?
Right.
Getting married to Travis is like, oh, great celebration, but then we have to, then we get to establish our life together. It's like each time you go through this cycle where celebration leads to struggle, and you just keep moving forward.
And so this is part of the book.
Yeah, it's actually the central part of the book. My story is wrapped in it, and I bounce around in my story a lot. It's not a linear story because I'm a meth addict, and meth addicts never tell anything like straight on through, right? So it's a lot more tangential. I'm working on a new book right now that's a little bit more of a linear story, but the main core of the book is to really talk about these steps of intention and how we can use these steps to move, a job forward or move a relationship forward, to move a day forward. I use this. I wanted to get back to working out. I use the same process to get myself back in a habit and back in a routine of working out. And it can work for anything.
Absolutely. And it's tough to digest that big, giant step working guide, but having an instruction manual, something that kind of gives us a guideline where we can benchmark our progress in any type of situation is really not something I've ever really thought of. Like, what happens once I get married, or once I get that job, or once, you cross, I guess you cross over, or you reach your goal. Now what?
Yeah. And so often we're left with now what?
Yeah.
And, the steps are beautiful. And I continue I'm always working on a step of the 12 steps. I'm always working on a step. And, but the thing is something will come up for me on a daily basis that I need to work all 12 steps on that thing. and you got to have a shorter version. You have to have a truncated version to get to what is my part and what needs to be amended. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. Which is a beautiful part of just being in recovery. Some of the wonderful miracles and gifts that we get from working these steps and being in a recovery-related program that, my wife always refers to that. Like, we have our moments, and we don't have that many moments where we're in disagreement or where we're in conflict. But when we are, there is that initial confrontation. There's that initial barking that happens. And within a few hours, in other words, the sun will not set where one of us won't go, okay, so what the fuck just happened here? Okay, okay, so what's the underlying issue? Because it doesn't seem like this is anything to be fighting about.
Yeah. And it goes back to a 6th step.
Yes. So what is that underlying, and most of the time it's like, how do I address the fear-based self-centeredness that is happening right now? Like, where am I, where is the fear coming from? And let's talk about that. And, the next day or that evening, it's always the same thing. It's like, I'm so glad that we can talk about this. I come from, living in Costa Rica. This is a very machista, male-dominated society. And talking about your feelings, talking about issues in your home, right? It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And a lot of the Costa Rican women will actually gravitate towards men from the United States, because if I'm in the U.S. and I say I'm in AA or I'm in NA or I'm in recovery or I'm a recovering addict, people are like, hey, man, good for you. And, congratulations on, beating that. And, in the Hollywood, it's almost like a rite of passage.
Right.
Like, so what rehab were you at? Oh, yeah, I was at whatever. Right. And so it's almost like a rite of over here, discussing being an addict or discussing being in a program or seeking therapy, seeking help to cope with family issues, marital issues is still taboo. So having that relationship, it always kind of surprises my wife. And whenever she brings it up, it kind of gives me that sense of gratitude of like, oh man, I'm so grateful that today I don't have to be like my dad. Because my dad was like, we don't talk about this. It's my way or the highway. And don't air your dirty laundry out in public. Boom, shut down. So what's left to do?
Wow. That's great though, that you have an opportunity to like really bring your recovery into your household. I mean, I have that same thing here with Travis, and it's just there's nothing more beautiful than that.
No. If they're receptive to it, it certainly makes the relationship so much easier, because the blaming goes away. You can't blame, you can't point a finger at. At the end of the day, it's always like, what's my part in this? And let's start working from there. And it's not just me; it's also her, which I'm assuming it's the same with you and Travis.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is many times the thing is really, really old. Like I'm thinking about the book that I'm working on right now. The title is Weeds of Unworthiness, and one of the first stories in there I talk about when I felt shame for the first time. And it was back when I was, 5, and I was wetting the bed every single night, and it's like, I'll bring that feeling of that little scared, shame-filled boy into an argument at 49 years old.
Wow. That's pretty heavy, especially being able to connect with that.
Yeah. We get to release that through the steps. That's the magic of the 6th step and the 7th step, is you get to release the weight of all of that stuff, and you don't have to let the shame spiral from 5 years old drag you down today. You can recognize that it was there, it is there, it's still there, and it happened, but not have it be the driving force in your life. And that's why recovery is just such a powerful tool for life.
Well, staying on that topic, how about when you first discovered that you were gay, and, the time first discovering when you were gay, and then also taking the steps to acknowledge it and then come out?
Yeah. It's funny. I have 2 coming out stories, so I'm not going to bore you with my coming out stories, but I went back in. But, the first time that I recognized that there was something different about me and my sexual choices was frightening, and I decided right then and there that I was going to live this double life, and I did that for a long time, and it wasn't until I really embraced, and actually, to be quite honest, meth actually helped me with this.
I'm sure.
We wouldn't do it if it didn't do something for us, right? But what it did is it took away all the stank of being gay, because I didn't care, because I was acting out, because I was loaded. And I got to just really experience and just push out of the closet, close the door behind me, and forget where it was. And by that point, I was so far out of the closet at that point that there was just no going back into it. Not that I ever would want to, but it was, I have to thank, if you have a choice, my drug of choice at that point, because that's what it did for me.
Well, it takes away all your inhibitions.
Yeah, it takes away all of your inhibitions so that you can be the person that you wanted to be in the first place. Really, Yeah. Now today in my life, I'm proud of who I am, and I'm, I don't really know if I became an addict because I was gay, or what the connection is there. I know that I sought ways to stop from feeling because I was afraid of my feelings, but I can do that today with all sorts of things.
Oh, absolutely. But that whole, I guess and in the beginning when we start talking about, why we started drinking and using in the first place, is so that we could, feel a part of, connect with others, kind of lose that sort of social anxiety. And, the drugs and the alcohol were the lubricants,
Right.
and so while you're in that state, anything goes. And whatever you're thinking about, it's the reality of who you are in that moment.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't like to give meth credit where credit is due, but
Well, it's funny, Omar. I talk about in the book that my life, when you look at your life, it looks like an erratic shape, like a key, like going from point A to point B to point C to point D. It's like all over the map, but it all fits. So doing meth for the first time, or going to prison, or acting out sexually, or this relationship or that relationship, when it's all looked at as a whole, it all fits perfect to where I am right now.
Absolutely.
And my life today is exquisite.
Beautiful. I love it. All right, so I guess that's your story.
Yeah. And it's ongoing.
It's a journey, man. It's all about the journey.
Yeah.
And then, as long as you stay on the path, this journey becomes so beautiful. So beautiful. And there's so much gratitude to have for it. So let's start wrapping up, George, Dr.
Okay.
George. And let's go into the section that I like to call For the Newcomers. And in this one, I like to talk more about that early recovery, because so many of our listeners are newcomers that are looking for, answers, and are looking for something to listen to on their way to work that provides them with some inspiration. So I'm going to ask you some questions about your early recovery, and I want you to respond with inspiring and insightful answers you can share with our newcomers. Are you ready?
Beautiful. Okay.
Love it. Okay, so number one, what was keeping you from getting clean or staying clean when you first got introduced to recovery?
When I first got introduced, the funny thing is when I first got introduced to recovery was down in Los Angeles, and I was called. One night I was called by this guy I was seeing, and he said, "I think you're an alcoholic, and I want you to go to a meeting tomorrow with my friend Scott." And I said, "Okay." and I went to a meeting the next day with his friend Scott, and then to fast forward, the next time my probation officer said, "I want you to go to a meeting and get serious about your recovery." And I said, "Okay." and then I went to a meeting and I got serious about my recovery. So here's the deal. I didn't have any resistance when it finally came down to it. When the rubber meets the road, you have to take action that puts you in the direction that you really want to go.
Absolutely.
And you have to want to get clean more than you want to get loaded. Period.
100% right. I love it. So number two, at what point did you have a spiritual awakening, that aha moment in recovery when you accepted that you were powerless over drugs and alcohol, but for the first time had developed that hope that you could recover?
Gosh, there's a few of them. There's a few of them. Probably that first one was, a spiritual awakening where I finally knew that I could recover. It's when I first went into a meeting and started hearing for the first time my story out of other people's mouth. I'll forget this guy that ended up being my very first sponsor. Great guy, covered in tattoos, long hair, always had his middle finger in the air. Absolutely the epitome difference, the total difference from me, although now I have long hair. But and he started sharing my story. I remember one time he was sharing about how he used to shoot up in the Denny's bathroom on Lake City Way here in Seattle. And I was like, I used to shoot up in the bathroom in Lake City Way. And all of a sudden I realized that I wasn't alone, that my story wasn't unique, that I wasn't so broken that I couldn't recover, because this guy was recovering, and he's covered in tattoos.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, it's funny, you know, we all have such reminiscent stories, and that was one of my aha moments. I remember going into all the resistance to being an addict, and I remember the therapist who told me, I can't help you. Like, I went to a therapist to try and get help, and he's like, I can't help you. You're an addict. And I went, what do you mean I'm an addict? It just didn't, it never dawned on me that the massive amounts of cocaine and alcohol and pills that I was taking on a daily basis would qualify me for being a drug addict. So I was so resistant to going to meetings that it actually took me 8 months from when he gave me that suggestion to actually be broken enough to go into my first meeting of Narcotics Anonymous. And that was where I had my first aha moment. These guys all started sharing, and exactly what you just said, exactly the way you described it is exactly what happened to me. I remember going, wow, these guys are telling my story, and they're smiling, and they're happy, and like, I want this.
Yeah.
You know, and I've been going to meetings ever since, really. So, I totally get it. When you get it, you get it.
This is why I share my story. This is why I wrote the book. This is why I share in meetings. It's why I'm active and participating member of NA, is because of that. That my story is going to be somebody else's aha moment.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you were having anonymous sex in the bushes? Yeah, I did too. You know, it's like I want to be able to be really open and honest about, because I don't have to put on airs. I don't have to be something I'm not. I am everything I am, and I'm nothing I'm not, period.
Oh, man. I love it, man. Beautiful. So, do you have a favorite book that you would recommend to a newcomer that you read in early recovery?
Oh, that I read in early recovery. Well, the basic text of Narcotics Anonymous is the number one, hands down, best guide to getting clean for an addict that there is. I think it's written in a language that's current. It's written in a language that spoke to me, you know, and I loved that book. Since early recovery, we've just recently had a new book that came out called Living Clean, The Journey Continues, which that's by far, hands down, the best book. You can pick up any single paragraph in that book and have your life change, I think.
Perfect. Beautiful. Yeah, that's the first time that one's been recommended, and that one's definitely going to be in the show notes, so you guys can go to the website and check that out.
Oh, yeah. And then I recommend my book.
Absolutely. You got to, I mean, come on.
I'm loving it. I hated my book when I wrote it, and I loved it, and then I hated it, and then I read it, and I'm like, that's stupid, and then I'm back in love with it again. And it's funny, and it's insightful, and I can read it with a new set of eyes, and realize that it's a good book. It's a really good book.
Absolutely. And we're going to have all three of those books listed in the show notes. Perfect. Beautiful. All right. And George, what is the best suggestion you have ever received?
Take action.
That's it. Perfect.
Take action. You know, if you want something different, take action. That's the long and short. Don't sit there whining about how miserable this is or that is. Do something about it. And my sponsees will call me, Omar, and they'll call me and they'll, and I'll say, what are you going to do about it? And that's it.
Yeah, because they love to whine. Oh my God.
I did.
Yeah, we all did. And our sponsors all shut us down. You know?
I remember I had a sponsor in AA once, and I went up to him right before the big home group meeting, and I don't even know what I was complaining about, but I was complaining about something. He said, George, I want you to go home tonight before you go to bed, and I want you to make your bed. And I want you to get up in the morning, and I want you to make your bed before you leave the house. And every day for a week, I want you to make your bed. And then you can come back to me and tell me what you're complaining about. And I was like, that is the stupidest thing I ever heard. But I went home and I did it. And I did it for a week. And then he comes up to me the next week and he says, so what was the issue that you were complaining about? I said, I have no idea.
It's so true, man. It's so, I mean, the shit that goes through our minds and that just moves our world. All right. In days, we don't even remember what it is.
Right.
It's so true, man. I love it. You just got to give them, and I do that all the time because, you know, sometimes I'll go into meetings, depending on what the topic is. You know, I'll go off on one of my shares, right? And I usually get these newcomers, right? And they're like, "Oh man, I so related with what you said, man, and that was awesome. And you know, would you sponsor me?" And I'm like, "Sure, man. Okay, so here's what I need you to do. I need you to go get the literature. I need you to pick up some books. I need you to make 90 meetings in 90 days. And I need you to call me." 9 times out of 10, that's the last time I see the guy. It's like, I mean, seriously.
Wait, you want me to what? What?
It's like the minute you give him an assignment, it's like kryptonite to a drug addict. It's unbelievable. My sponsor, that's the thing. He used to tell me all the time. He goes, you know what? It surprises me all the time. I go, what? He goes, you actually do what I tell you to do. I'm like, well, you told me to do it, so I'm just doing it. He goes, no, I hear you. Keep doing it. But, man, trying to get an addict to take a suggestion, oh, my God. It's like trying to, you know, thread a needle through a, what is it? Put a... the camel through. Okay, forget that whole thing. Anyway, it's hard.
It's really, really hard.
It is. I'm so grateful that I was so beaten. I mean, I was just beaten when I came in that I literally just kind of put my brain on a shelf and said, I'm not going to use this right now. So you're going to have to guide me. And it was the best decision I ever made.
Well, I've always said that the 3 spiritual principles are out of order, and we talk about that they're how: honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. And I think it's who: willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness. Yeah. I mean, I think willingness has to come first. You have to be deep enough to want it.
100%. Beautiful. All right, man. This has been awesome. Great suggestions, Dr. George. And before we say goodbye, I would like to ask you one more question. Of all the meetings you have attended anywhere in the world, which group is your favorite, and where is that group located?
Oh, you know what? My home group's my favorite group. It's Atmosphere of Recovery. It's Tuesday nights, 6 o'clock, the Capitol Hill Presbyterian Church in Seattle, Washington. It is a gay meeting and straight friendly, and it's a powerful group where we all get to participate, and I love that meeting. It's the best meeting in Seattle.
Perfect. George, thank you so much for sharing your experience, strength, and hope with us.
Delmar, I really appreciate this.
I love it. I love it. We have now reached the end of our show. Thanks for joining us. And as we say here in Costa Rica, pura vida.
Pura vida, oh.
Thank you for joining us on the SHAIR Recovery Podcast. To check out the show notes page on this interview or to thank our guests for sharing their story, go to www.theshairpodcast.com. While you're on the website, don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter to stay up to date on the latest news, podcasts, and interviews. Want to be one of our guests and share your story? Then go to our website and click on the Share Your Story button. We share our inspiring recovery stories every Tuesday, so subscribe to our show on iTunes or Stitcher Radio to get your free weekly download. We'll see you then. The opinions shared on this show reflect those of the individual speaker and not of any 12-Step Fellowship as a whole. And though we discuss 12-Step recovery and the impact it had in our lives, we do not promote or endorse any 12-Step Anonymous program.